So, welcome to this meditation. And see if you can notice what's here, what's present for you. And maybe there's just this spaciousness. Maybe there's the expansive awareness of self. Maybe that's all that is here. Or you may be aware of not only the expansiveness of self, but also the 10,000 things, or the different parts that make up this wonderful multiplicity and diversity of the inner world. Notice how the perspective of self allows us to tune into this panoramic view of what is here. Imagine being able to open all the doors, all the windows of your house, of your inner world, so that you have this beautiful flow of self-energy navigating its way into every corner. It's possible to be aware of all of it. This is the space of self that welcomes, nourishes, supports, rejoices in the 10,000 things, but not at any point lords it over the 10,000 things. It just allows it to be, at least in its wave-like quality. And there may be some parts that are a little bit closer. A few parts that are a little bit further away. And notice if you can breathe with all that is here, sharing one breath. And as we embark on this meditation, notice how there's no correct way to meditate. There's no correct way to sit, to be, to breathe. You are the authority on what's right for you. So the invite is to be exactly as you are. Allowing yourself to be fully human and allowing anything to pass by, the awareness of self. Sometimes we can compare self as a canvas or the spaciousness of the open sky or the ocean. And self in its wave-like quality simply allows, rejoices, rests in sometimes it's helpful to reach out to poetry as ways of tuning into this self, this welcoming aspect of self. And here, the Rumi's guest house is a really wonderful way of welcoming all the parts as these sacred visitors. Within the guest house of self. Imagine that self creates just the right, the perfect setting for each of our parts. If you really tune into the creativity and playfulness of your inner world, you'll see that at a moment's notice, in your mind's eye, self will create beautiful spaces for each of your parts. Try it out now. And it does that co-creatively with parts through this ability to be tuned into each part with self energy. So see if you can stay here. See if parts can finally feel welcome. What would you like? Self invites hearts to co-create, to speak their sacred wishes, their sacred needs. What is it that is your heart's desire? How can I assist you? Self asks. And now we're encroaching onto the aspect of the particle, the actionable aspect of self that has the capability of leadership. See if you can tune into a sense that as self effortlessly attends and witnesses these unique desires of each and every part. See if you can notice how self can really attune, provide effortlessly. All that is needed in the inner world is here. It feels like some of these parts have traveled for miles on their knees through the desert, to quench their thirst, to relieve their pain, their sorrow. And can they sense that self is here as this ever-flowing, ever-present, clear source of nourishment? This is their inheritance. This is what's permanently available. And there might be some parts here that don't trust this. Where were you when I needed this nourishment? They might ask self. And tune into what self for you. What does self in you answer back to these questions? Where were you when I needed you? And for me, the knowing is that self has been here all along. Hidden in plain sight. The wave quality of self is unharmed, unperturbed by anything that has ever happened. And it's always been here as the backdrop. That we can now turn around and look at and return to and see as the very fabric of the walls of this guest house. Is it possible for these parts to attune to this sense of unchanging presence of self? at least in its wave-like nature. This wave-like nature doesn't have any boundaries. It easily penetrates through anything that appears, just as in the openness of the sky, the sunlight penetrates effortlessly through any cloud. Clouds may temporarily obscure the sun, but the light still shines through, radiating, illuminating, warming. So this is the innate essence, the core essence of our being. Deep, deep down, far, far in, closer than your breath. Is the very essence of self as a wave. Can you imagine that as you take your next breath, self is closer than the breath? And attune to how the body responds to this knowing. And we don't have to effort here. We don't have to do anything in particular in order to recognize this being, this presence, even in any contractions in the body, any thoughts, any feelings. If we imagine those as momentary clouds, notice how the light of self still permeates. If you were to imagine where this wave-like quality ends, see if your parts can start to wander around and look for the end of this presence. Is it not like trying to find the end of a rainbow? It appears to be everywhere. And just as you think you've reached the end, it looks like there's miles upon miles This is how vast this transpersonal quality of self is. And that has always been present to anything that these parts have witnessed, been through. Now, self as a particle was still in its maturation phase. Most of the wounds that our parts carry or are exposed to have most likely occurred before we were 7. In small quantities, we've already sampled the key wounds. And unfortunately, at that stage, self as a particle wasn't mature enough to be able to defend, protect. At that point, we relied on our caregiver's self. So self in its particle form is only really fully developed as you see it now, in this moment in time. So at least one aspect of self was always there, and the other aspect was not mature enough in order to protect us. But it is now. And this is why we can update our parts, show them who we are now, show them these 8 qualities: confidence, creativity, courage, compassion, clarity, curiosity, connection, and calm. And perspective, perseverance, playfulness, patience, presence. So maybe some of these parts, when they were younger, they needed the adults around us to have access to these 8 C's and 5 P's. But now you have it. And maybe it's time to invite these parts to notice who you are now. Back then, hidden in plain sight. Right now, very capable, actionable, relational, co-creative, tangible, embodied, yours. I am. This is who I am. This is who these parts are. This is the guest house. This is the home. This is now. So the door is always open. The door of self, or infinite doors of self within this guest house. It's always open for this golden thread of self energy, the chi, the prana, the kundalini, to flow through, reawakening these parts to who you are now. And if you have parts that are mainly intellectual, maybe located somewhere in the head, in the mind, maybe some are above you. Notice how it feels to recognize that the body is also composed of self. This beautiful thread circulating through every cell, every inch. Every precious fragment of your body permeates with this luminosity, this radiance, this aliveness. And notice how it feels to breathe into the alive space of your lungs. Yes, I have lungs. Let me attune to this space that breathes for me without me having to do anything about it. Notice if there's any gratitude that lands here for the aliveness of the lungs. Yes, that I can take another breath and let it go. And another, and let it go. When we were born, the first thing we did was we took a breath. The next thing we did was we gave it away, we let it go. Effortless. Who was doing the breathing for you? Who is breathing now? What is breathing? Yes, you have a heart. Who is beating the heart? When you fall asleep at nighttime, who breathes you? Who beats your heart? When you dream, where do the dreams appear? When you sleep so deeply that you have no memory of any dream or having woken up even once, where did the parts go? Who or what was there, breathing, beating your heart? And what is even closer than your breath? What is so intimately at the core of you that it effortlessly welcomes everything, the breath, the heartbeat, the parts. The blushing, the sighing, the yawning, crying. And notice how when we tune into the perfection of you, when we start to wonder in awe at the impossibility of you sat here breathing, the heart beating, the other organs doing their vital jobs. Is it possible to tune into the luminous beauty? And if that's difficult in this moment to tune into this sense of radiant luminosity here, notice if there's just one part of the body that feels really luminous, really spacious, really open, really relaxed. Notice how you can start to vibrate in that part of the body. And as that part of the body vibrates with self, through the laws of resonance, it spreads to the next part, and the next, and the next, and the next. Until your whole being lights up with joy, with presence. This is the backdrop of who you always are. It permeates through you. And for self, the multiplicity and diversity of parts is not a problem whatsoever. Just as for the air, multiple beings breathing the air is not a problem whatsoever. Or for the spaciousness of the universe. This is how everything mirrors, mimics, copies. Just as there are multiple beings on this planet, there are multiple beings within us, none of which is a problem whatsoever. We tend to think of ourselves as a one single entity. But if we were to look inside under a microscope, we would see that there are billions of cells. Tiny little microbes whizzing around doing their job without you having to do anything about it. It's as though your inner being follows some kind of wisdom, some kind of order of its own. Whose rhythm does your heart beat to? So the multiplicity and diversity is not a problem whatsoever, so long as each component understands itself to be part of a larger whole, an infinite fabric of existence. Imagine parts as perfectly shaped pieces of a puzzle that create a large tapestry of who you are. And in IFS and other teachings, when we integrate parts, we're fitting them among the family of things, welcoming them in the guest house. Here's your place. It's always been here for you. No other part can fill it. This one's yours. We're helping parts to remember their shape so that once again it might fit within the tapestry of who you are. Maybe it momentarily lost its way, forgot that it belongs in this guest house. But with really skillful tools, we can help these parts remember their unique shape within this puzzle. so that we might operate as one beautiful tapestry once again, one orchestra, all singing from the same hymn sheet. And every part is important. So when we remember this, multiplicity is beautiful. How can anyone truly be out of place? How can any part be unwelcome? The closer we get to viewing the brilliance of this beautiful tapestry, the closer we get to attaining self's panoramic perspective, the more we can feel ourselves being in this world as an integrated whole person with the access to these wonderful qualities of self. That's our inheritance. That's what's on offer. And there are no conditions attached to this offer. It's free, doesn't have a time frame. All parts are welcome. In fact, all parts are not only welcome, but are vital. Just as we come to the end of this meditation, see if you can allow all parts to slot in, to fit in, to take up their space among the family of things. So that you can marvel at how beautiful it really is. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your creativity. Thank you for your playfulness. Hmm. Hmm. So here we are. See if you can take a few more conscious breaths. See if you can start returning to the space that you're in. Mm.